GM fam, fallout from the SBF situation continues. In particular, we're going to dive into a case study of how Bitcoin played out on the crv pool. So, by way of background, we know that bridges are, of course, precarious. But still, there's no real way of earning yield on Bitcoin except for wrapping it into Ethereum or wrapping it onto other chains where people are willing to offer yield. Now, yield comes with risk. We saw this with Solana. About 16,000 wrapped Bitcoin on Solana have dropped at least 80% in value and are likely going to be about worthless. So some rough news in that front. Curve has always been one of the interesting destinations for Bitcoin on Ethereum. So there's a few main Bitcoin wrappers on Ethereum, the biggest of which is WBTC. There's 237,000 wrapped Bitcoin in existence. This is the 21st largest token on CoinGecko and about 1% of Bitcoin's total supply. So WBTC is dominant and in fact formed one leg of Curve's very popular TriCrypto pool, which is a pool that natively provides hedged exposure to Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Tether. There's still a few notable smaller Bitcoin wrappers, one of which is Ren BTC, and with 2,336 Bitcoin have been wrapped in Ren, and there's 557 SBTC from Synthetics. These three have been considered to have pretty reliable peg mechanisms, so in fact Curve created an SBTC pool. This is sort of like a three pool for wrapped Bitcoin. It can be thought of as a means of de-risking because you have a few different options. You might only lose a third in value if one depegged instead of full value, and it provides some fungibility. So this base pool has about 1,000 wrapped Bitcoin within it, worth about $20 million. 2/3 of the SBTC, in fact, is parked in this pool, and it's been the basis of a number of other pools on Ethereum. So it's been pretty successful and a key piece of the infrastructure for Bitcoin DeFi on Ethereum. Now, against this context, let's zoom into the collapse of FTX. We saw that FTX collapse had some ripple effects, especially like a lot of fear running throughout the industry. In particular, we're going to look into the Ren pool. Ordinarily, it's a pretty quiet pool. You can see its entire history here. It generally has kind of oscillated between 80-20 in either direction. For some period, it was primarily Ren BTC, then became primarily WBTC. But very recently, just before this had happened, it was essentially 50-50. Now, the reason that it can handle these swings is because this pool is a pretty high A parameter. If you're looking at the A parameter, you can consider this to be like if it is a very high A parameter, then it can tolerate more significant imbalance. And this is generally for pools that have a strong peg redemption mechanism. Both Ren and WBTC are managed kind of directly by Ren Protocol and BitGo. So it's pretty easy to, if the pool gets out of balance, claim an arbitrage opportunity. And as a result, even when it's like 80-20, you can see that the difference in trading one Bitcoin is about 0.005. So let's dive now into the past month. We saw that volume in Ren pool usually pretty quiet. There's not that much Bitcoin activity, even on the wrapped Bitcoin on Ethereum, but it's still like pretty flat. And then suddenly, since FTX collapses, spikes, seeing about 10x activity. And this also spelled very high utilization for Curve. It means more fees, so that's good news for Curve LPs. The depeg was pretty interesting because it depegged very quickly, but it wasn't sure which way it wanted to depeg because of the amount of FUD flying around. So initially it depegged towards all the FUD was around Ren, so a lot of Ren started getting dumped in the pool. And then almost on a dime it flipped and the FUD started moving towards WBTC. So it flipped the other direction and all of a sudden became dominated by WBTC where it stands today. So what's going on with this FUD? Is Ren actually safe? So the concern was that Alameda had bought Ren back in 2021, which means, does Alameda hold the keys? Is this the so-called hacker or any of the leadership going to have access and be able to steal the Bitcoin? So there's a lot of people suggesting you get out of Ren BTC, including BadgerDAO, who knows a lot about Bitcoin and Ethereum. Then Ren issued a statement, and we talked to someone who knows a bit more about the deal, and they claim that there's no actual access that Alameda has to the bridge. So it remains to be seen, but there was kind of a move to stamp down this FUD. But at which point, it almost didn't matter whether it was true or not, because suddenly came WBTC FUD, because WBTC is a minter, as one of their minters is Alameda. So a lot of this Bitcoin was minted onto Ethereum by Alameda, and there was concerns that this might cause issue. So BitGo then issued a statement claiming everything's secure. We're not qualified to judge, but just we urge people to use caution, because if you are wrapping your Bitcoin onto Ethereum, there's always going to be risks. There's yield. Whenever there's yield, you can't get yield without some risk. Not financial advice, but that's just kind of a rule of thumb. So be very careful with wrap Bitcoin. If you are holding any, it might be a good time to wrap it back to raw Bitcoin if you're concerned. Also be very wary, because there's a lot of concerns that centralized exchanges, these tend to explode. We've seen that they can go to zero overnight. Some of these popular Bitcoin yield pools on Curve, HBTC, that's Huobi. There's been some questions there. BBTC is Binance. Binance is the biggest, but being big might not be a moat in having a centralized exchange. So be very careful and make sure you're researching all these if you're actually going to be holding any exchange-backed Bitcoin in this kind of perilous times. It's very dangerous out there. Thankfully, if you've been on Curve, you've been safer than most, but who knows? Stay safer out there, friends.